Welcome everyone who is attending live or watching this after the fact. This is our continuing webinar series. This is currently our last scheduled webinar for this season, but we might add more as the season goes on. Tonight we're going to be talking about FLL League Challenge judging and the process here in the Alabama region. I'm Drew. I am one of your program delivery partners for FLL Challenge. Joining me tonight, we also have my wife Taylor, who is another program delivery partner. Taylor, you want to say hi?
Hi.
In addition, we also have Jamie McClung, who is the first senior mentor for Alabama, as well as a Champions Award winning coach for FLL Challenge.
Hello, everybody.
And we also have a gaggle of judges joining us. We have Scarlett Bautista, who is one of the first Vistas for Alabama, as well as a core values judge.
Hi.
We also have Anna Strutzenberg, who is experienced as a referee, as well as an innovation project judge.
Hello.
And we have Andrew Dinio, who is a frequent robot design judge.
Greetings.
So hopefully tonight we're going to touch on all three areas of judging. If you joined us earlier in the year, you were here for the innovation project judging session, and so you learned more about that there. We're going to touch on the judging more specifically here. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we're going to look at some documents while the rest of us talk. I'm going to share the screen. There should be nothing there until I go to open up a few documents. The first thing we're going to touch on is the FLL Challenge Overview. And so this is kind of the backbone of everything we're doing. And this is a document that you as a coach have access to online, free of access for everybody. It's also something that you can find, I believe, in the engineering notebook, possibly in the team meeting guide. I don't think it's actually in that one, though. I think it is in the engineering notebook, though. So in FLL League Challenge, we have the robot, and everybody loves the robot. They love to see it on the table, love to see it do its missions. But your robot's score on the table only counts for 1/4 of your overall score. There's much more to this competition. So we will say it before, we'll say it over and over again. It's more than robots, and the robot is the vehicle, right? We use the robot to get the kids in the door, and there's so much more they get to learn about and participate in that really goes to making them a well-rounded team. And you have to do well in all 4 areas to rise up to win that coveted Champions Award. So we talked about, so that is the robot game. That's the part most people are familiar with. You play in your 2.5-minute matches, at least 3 of them, and your highest score counts. And we rank the teams from highest score to lowest score, and that's how you get your robot game ranking. But we also have 3 areas that are judged by our wonderful judges at the competition. We have core values, where we look at how well your team exhibits the first core values, including teamwork, discovery, innovation, having fun. All kinds of things go into this just to make sure that your team is a team that can work well with themselves and with others. We also have robot design, which focuses not on how well your robot scores points, but how well your robot is engineered. How did you design your robot? How did you come up with your strategy? How did you improve your design? How did you communicate your design? All that good stuff goes into that judging. And finally, we have the innovation project, which is the final quarter of your score. And it's again based on the challenge topic area that you have researched, the problem you identified, the solution you come up with, and how well you develop and share that solution. And so what ends up happening, one thing that most teams may not be aware of, in none of these areas is your final award ranking determined based on your raw scores in any of these. If you score 1,000 points in the robot game, that doesn't really matter. It matters that you had the #1 high score or the #2 high score. And core values, if there are 10 teams, we don't look at, well, this team scored 50 points in core values judging and this team scored, 30 points. We look at this team had the first most core values points. This team had the second most. So everything you do and get evaluated on at the end of the day is going to be based on your ranking, not the raw point total. So if you are worried about just a huge point disparity, as long as you're keeping it close in the ranking, that's what matters. So keep that in mind. So that's your overview. Those are your 4 areas. And remember, we look for teams that are well-rounded across all 4 areas, not only for winning the Champions Award, but also advancing from one level to another. If you come in and just have a stellar robot and you score 1,000,000 points on the table, great. But if you have poor core values, you didn't have a very solid design process, and you don't have a strong innovation project, you're going to get the Robot Game Award, sure, but you're not going to advance and go to the next level of competition, because we want our teams to be well-rounded. So that's kind of an overview of the program. Would anybody like to add anything about the overview? Okay. Doesn't look like it. So we will move on from the overview, and we are going to talk about the judging process. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about robot game. I will flash up the score sheet. The score sheet is what's important for the robot game. Know your missions, you'll get points. This is how the referees score you, and this is what goes into the robot game part of your score. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand, and very visible to most people. And again, you're ranked highest score to least highest score. And that covers your robot game. So tonight we're going to focus mostly on judging. So the way judging works is you have 30 minutes in your judging session. And what's going to happen is your team's going to come in, and there's going to be a welcome. And right from the time your team steps foot in the room, you are being judged. From team welcome all the way down to feedback. You are being judged based on a variety of factors. The first very formal thing you get judged on is your innovation project presentation. You have 5 minutes of that presentation, and you have another 5 minutes for Q&A. Joining us as our project expert again tonight, we have Anna Stretzenberg, and I've got pulled up now the innovation project rubric. So Anna, in just like, a couple of minutes, can you just kind of hit some highlights on, as a judge, what are you looking for on the rubric during this time with the teams? What are your make or breaks, things like that?
Yeah, so you can hear me, right? I unmuted myself. Okay. So I think I went a little bit more in depth with the rubric last time we had one of these. So I kind of wanted to just highlight again what the most important things are for me personally when I'm judging. So first I want to see that your team really went out and really talked to some people, some professionals, someone about their project. That's always going to be something that can set a team apart from another one. If you can find somebody on your team who has a parent, I guarantee someone is going to know someone, and you will be able to get in contact with people. And it's always really fun to see kids talking to professionals. And it's fun because most professionals aren't going to be mean to anyone, which I feel like can be a little intimidating. But the more professionals you can get, the better you can incorporate that, not only in your design process, which is something that we're always really interested in, but it's just going to be good experiences for kids moving forward. Speaking of the design process, I really, really love it when people talk about, well, we came up with this idea and it didn't exactly work, but that's okay. Here's how we pivoted. Because I understand the world isn't perfect. Nothing's going to work the first time. If it does, then good on you, but it's very likely that it didn't work right the first time. So telling us what your failures were and accepting those as maybe not failures, but happy little accidents, and how we made that better is always something that I really find it shows a maturity level of certain teams. The next thing that I really wanted to talk about was the presentation. Sometimes Unfortunately, you can come up with this really, really, really cool project, and it can be nothing out like there is out on the market right now. It can be super innovative, but if you can't convey that to me and get me excited about it and make me understand why the project is awesome, I'm not going to know much about it. I'm not a professional in many things. So it's important that what you say in the judging is what I know about what it is. If you don't say it in the judging, you might as well have not done it. And I know Drew said it. I know Jamie said it. Everybody said it before, but it's really, really important that you make sure that your kids can like beat into, no, this isn't like anything on the market, or it is like it's something on the market, but this is why it's different and why it's better. And then as far as like presentation goes, I know it can be hard to sit in front of 3 adults and kind of talk about something that you've worked so hard on, but if you can find like a fun and interactive way other than a kid sitting there with a note card just face down reading in it, it's going to make it points count towards it. So making it interactive for us, showing us that you're excited, is going to set you apart from teams as well. And then the other thing that I did want to touch on really briefly is like, I already said that. I think that those were my like main points. Am I missing anything? Does anybody want to add anything?
I will kind of reemphasize what Anna said, is that we have these 5 minutes of a presentation, these 5 minutes for question and answer. If it does not come up in that 5-minute presentation and the judges don't ask about it in that 5 minutes Q&A, it never happened. That is the only 10-minute window the judges have to find out about your project and to judge you on your project. So anything you want conveyed has to happen in those 10 minutes, just like Anna was saying.
Yeah. And then just one more thing, like it is, we do have 10 minutes with your team to figure out what their project is about. And I am going to see many teams and many, many kids. And so I've said it before, we're not going to be able to read like a gigantic, huge binder full of stuff, but like a sheet handout that has like highlighted points of this is interesting things, this is how it fits into the rubric, will help me out when I have to go into judging deliberation and talk about why your team might stack up differently to another person's team, just because it'll give me that reminder of, oh yeah, this team did do this. But again, if you didn't talk about it in judging, I can't use that information in the deliberation.
And that's a very good point that Anna brought up that we haven't actually touched on yet, that your judges will see your team and probably about 5 or 6 other teams. But at the state competition, there are going to be at least 24 teams. And so not only do these judges have to remember, okay, which of the teams I saw was the best, how can I convince these other judges who did not see my team that my team was better than their team? And if your team comes in and does not give your judges information to work with, they can't make that argument as well as the other judges will. And so that's going to end up hurting your team when it comes to deliberations. So that's a very good point to bring up. Anything else on project?
It's not exactly project related, but something that when I was old enough to start judging, if you have a chance to volunteer this year, I'd highly recommend it, because there's a way I can sit here and tell you what happens in judging, and we can all sit here and tell you this is what happens, but until you actually are there and you can kind of see what some of the thought processes are, it's still going to kind of be vague. So if you get a chance to volunteer, I'd highly recommend it. It helped me out at the end, but it's just something that I know Drew and Taylor have recommended it before, but I just figured I'd add on to that. It's a good idea if you have a chance.
And I'm sure Jamie will have plenty to say about that after we get through the judges, when he offers us our coach's perspective too.
Yeah.
So that's your kind of your project judging. Now, I will say that there will be somebody in the room designated as your project judge. All 3 judges are judging all 3 areas kind of simultaneously, but we have one judge who is responsible, like the primary responsible person for the innovation project rubric. and that person is usually going to be termed your project judge. But just know that all of the judges in the room are paying attention to you and evaluating you. So after the innovation project section, we move on to robot design. Again, you'll have a 5-minute period to explain your robot design. You won't have a table in the room, so you're not going to be demonstrating your robot because this judging is not about demonstrating your robot. It is about exhibiting your design and strategy process. After that 5-minute period, you'll have another 5 minutes Q&A with the judges, just like with the project judging. Anything that doesn't come up in those 10 minutes total didn't happen. So I've got the rubric pulled up here. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Denio to talk a little bit about his experience as a robot design judge and any key takeaways he might have for us.
Thanks, Drew. Anna did a pretty good job kind of talking about some of the things in general, and those definitely apply to robot design as well. If you look at the rubric, if you kind of just go down the columns, beginning, developing, and accomplished, there's pretty much specific keywords that they keep using over and over again. So in beginning, unclear, limited, minimal, those kind of keywords. Developing is partial, inconsistent, simple, and then accomplished is clear, consistent. Those are those keywords. So Anna was talking about like showing something and giving something to the judges, and that definitely applies to robot design. If you can give us, even just a sheet with a picture of your robot, because sometimes we often forget what robots look like because we see so many. But if your robot stands out and we see a picture of it, just kind of helps. And some of the documentation, if you have an engineering notebook, like that's probably a really good strategy to have, is like to document necessarily like everything, but it's not necessarily a requirement, right? But if you document everything, if you document your mission strategy, evidence of how everyone applied their coding skills and how people were cross-trained on things, and how you came up with a plan. What are your innovative features on your robot? How does your sensors and your attachments work? How does your robot act? How did you test your code? Give us your code. Show us your improvements. Show us how you started and where you're at now. Talk about your design process, like when you met in your meetings and how you came up with ideas and stuff. And if you do all that stuff, like if it's, documented and the students are able to talk it, then like I have no problem giving a team like accomplished all the way down the line if it's well documented and they can explain it well. It's when they don't have their code, maybe they don't even have the robot in the room, they don't know some of these things. That's when you start getting the developing and beginning. So, I mean, we judge to the rubric, and when I was a mentor, I wish I knew what I knew now. But I mean, we give you the grading sheet. So, my suggestion is just to go off the grading sheet and check all those boxes yourselves. Does anyone have anything to add about robot design?
I did have a couple of things I wanted to touch on. That was a really, really great overview. So like with project, if it doesn't come up in the 10 minutes, it doesn't count. That doesn't mean don't give the judges anything to look at after the fact. Andrew mentioned having a picture of your robot. That's great, and it helps the judges refer back later. Don't have them like half of your engineering process in a notebook that they're not ever going to have the chance to read. Some teams don't realize, because we said you're not going to have a table to really demonstrate your robot, but definitely bring your robot with you. Andrew was talking about some teams forget to bring their robot to judging or don't realize to bring it. Bring your robot. Let the judges see it. Let them touch it if you're comfortable with that, but you don't have to do that. And I'm a software person, and I know that a lot of teams, when they get into judging, really get hung up on look at our robot. Here's how we designed our robot. And a lot of teams miss out on the opportunity to brag about, yeah, our code was written this way. Here's how we wrote our software. Here's what our software looks like. So many teams just kind of don't talk about their code. And that's at least one entire line on the rubric here is talking about your robot and code's innovative features, how code makes the robot act. So anything about your code and not getting hung up on just the hardware. Anybody else want to add on to the robot design discussion? Okay, so that will wrap up our piece on robot design. And then we move into 3 minutes of the core values reflection. But I will say a couple of things. You are also being judged on your core values during the team welcome. When you're doing your innovation project presentation and talking about your robot design process, your core values are being evaluated. When you answer questions, how you answer questions is being evaluated in your core values. So all this time, you might have been talking about the project or the robot design, but this whole time, even through the reflection period, when you're actually, reflecting back on how did the season go, you're being evaluated on your core values. And if I can scroll through my document real quick, you notice this rubric's a little emptier. So I'm going to turn it over to Scarlett to talk about the core values judging and kind of how that works.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So because how the new rubric is set up, as you can see, there's not much to work with there. So like Drew said, we'll have to look at we'll have to pick up some information from other portions of the presentation, like innovation and robot design. We'll be paying attention to like you said, how questions are answered and how they interact with each other and interact with us. So, which is good because it promotes using core values in all aspects. But yeah, when I'm judging, I look for multiple or unique examples of each category that I'm judging. Because like on the rubric, the differences between beginning, developing, and accomplished is the word minimally, inconsistently, and consistently. And then, so wait, hold on, sorry. Okay. So I would try to find how much they exemplify each one of these and how they do it. So yeah. Also, I guess generally, I pay attention to how they talk to each other, how they exemplify their teamwork. And I really look at how they make sure everyone is involved and has a part in everything, and also how they present and how they share the knowledge that they gain with their community, because that is important.
And I'll add on to what Scarlett said here, because I really like that she said, I try to find out. And if your team is in judging and the judge is trying to find out, you're going to do worse on your rubric. You want the judges to have as easy of a day as possible. You want the judge to kind of be smacked in the face by, oh my gosh, look at all their core values. This is an easy rubric to fill out because they told me everything they did.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of teams give a lot of the information that I need in the beginning of their project presentation. They lay out for me what they do and how they use their skills and all of that. So that's usually very helpful with the core values, since we only have 3 minutes, because that doesn't leave a lot of room for there's no separate thing from question and answer versus presentation.
And I would also add on that, like that Scarlett mentioned, that they do that in their project presentation. But one of the things that can really help a team is exhibiting that in their project presentation as well as in their robot design presentation. How did you do it with your project? How did you do it with your robot design?
Yeah, that's all I got. If anyone wants to add anything.
So Scarlett, let's say that you were evaluating a team's core values and they were discussing with each other about how to answer a question or respond to the judges. And one of the students just very loudly to the other students tells them that they're not listening to them. How would you compare that on your core values evaluation?
Well, that clearly shows that they don't know how to interact with each other in a respectful manner. So that would take off some points on my end.
So that is kind of a thing we're looking at here, is that the judges are looking at how well the students are interacting with each other. So even though your students are friends, they get along maybe, if they're exhibiting behaviors that are outwardly, counter to the first core values, which are all listed here in the core values rubric, that's going to penalize them. Does anybody else or Scarlett have any other remarks on the core values judging?
That situation sounded very familiar.
So it's a sore topic for Jamie. So that mostly kind of wraps up your judging session. And then at the end of your judging session, the last 5 minutes, you will get verbal feedback from your judges. You will usually get something positive and something to improve on, both from the robot design area as well as from the innovation project area. If there's time, you might hear some words from the core values area. But every team comes into judging and they will have this 30-minute session. Now, each set of judges will see about 6 or 7 teams at worst. Those judges, after the team leaves, the judges will spend about 10 minutes getting the rubrics filled out, marking, checking all the boxes, leaving any comments they want. And when they're done, they will send that off to the judge advisor or the judging scorekeeper. And that'll be entered into the system and will be used to calculate the initial rankings within your areas. From there, all of the different judges get together and talk about the highly ranked teams based on their judging scores and on their robot scores. And we start to get an idea of which teams are going to be contenders for the awards. One thing that we didn't address in core values is a big new change this year. And that change, I'm going to pull back up the score sheet. And that is, in addition to your core values judging, some of your core values are being evaluated based on what the referees see at the table. When your team comes up to the table, every match you're going to get evaluated. And by default, you're going to get a 3. If the referees see very positive core values behavior, your team exhibits great professionalism, they can bump you up to a 4 for that match. If they see you exhibiting behaviors that are very not first core values, they can bump you down to a 2 on the core values rubric here. So this little piece of the score sheet actually gets factored in to your judging score, which is one way that we kind of get to see that your core values are being consistently observed across the team. So not just in judging, but also when you're at the table in the heat of competition. But that's kind of a little peek behind the curtain, at least from the judge's point of view. Does anybody have anything they want to add at this point before we turn it over to Jamie for some coaching perspective? Doesn't look like it. So Jamie, as a former Champions Award winning coach yourself, the floor is yours.
I would just say, as coaching, and we've mentioned several times that all this can seem very, very, very overwhelming. There is a lot going on here, and there's a lot that you got to consider and a lot that you got to get prepared for. So I just recommend that the biggest thing that you do is to focus on those rubrics. Those are kind of your guideline and that's what the judges are judging you based off of, is those rubrics. So those are kind of your guideline to know, am I accomplishing or getting where I need to be? So if you grade your students based off those rubrics, when you look at it, do I feel like I'm getting there? I recommend you doing some mock judging sessions. I love to get our principals, or if you got one of your partners in the community or somebody that you've talked to, let them see your presentation and let them rank you and see what they say. Because generally, a lot of times they may come in with a fresh pair of eyes, and they may rank this totally different than what you think you are at. Maybe they do know something, maybe they don't know as much about what, everybody's opinion on the rubrics still can be subjective. So what is clear to one person may not be as clear to somebody else based off their experience. So it's great to have lots of practice judging sessions so that they get used to the timing and get used to the rhythm, get used to being in front of adults that they're not used to, that don't communicate on a daily basis. Having those adults ask them questions and responding to them, it takes away a lot of the jitters if you do those things in practice. Because when you get to the real judging session, the kids won't know the three people in front of them, and they're not mean to them, but generally most students have trouble just warming up to strangers and adults just instantly. So there's a lot of nervousness because you're at the competition finally, and then you're going to have some more nerves because you're in front of judges and you don't know what's going to come out of their mouth when they get that situation. So it's best to practice and get used to the situation that you're going to be into. It's just like the old coaches, and even as I did as coaching, I want to practice in the environment that I want them to be into for their game. Because if we don't practice that way, we're not going to play that way. So in the same situation for this, is if you don't get them ready for a judging session, it can be overwhelming to them when they're there. Even if they know everything and everything's great, they can stress when they get in the judging room just because of the situation it is. And I have seen it all. I've seen kids go cry, and saw a team help their teammate that went to cry, and so that got them some good core values bonus points. So things happen in there. I would have a student that was saying you're not listening to me. That could go wrong and hurt the team that's in there. So there's lots of situations that can happen, but the more you can practice, and inside of that, I would say also at competition, is once you get to competition, that is not the time to get your coaching and getting prepared at the venue. When you get them at the competition, that's the time they need to see you being calm and controlled and smooth. You got to be the smooth operator. You want to be building them up, encouraging them. They're going to be at nerves bundles. If you get in there and you're going to start doing some last minute coaching, they're not going to, chances are they're not going to pay any attention to what you said, because they've got 100 things going through their mind. They're trying to remember, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Where am I supposed to be? And you just need to be encouraging and let them have fun. Hopefully they've practiced and they're ready and prepared for this. So you keep reminding them that, hey, you've done all the work. Just go in there and have fun and just do it today, and enjoy the experience. So I've seen a lot of different times where the coach is like really, pounding it in right before they go in the room. And I think best to be comfortable. Get them, it's okay. And that includes the robot game. I've been in situations where it goes terrible, in situations where it goes great. And you just need to be the encouraging supporter in those situations, rather than worrying about coaching at that time. You can coach them if it all goes bad. Coach them that early on and just say, well, you got to just pick up and we'll get back to it. But don't worry about coaching on the day of competition. On the day of competition, you're the biggest cheerleader they got. And you're the one that's going to be right behind their back, giving them support, patting them on the back, telling them you did great. Even if they do bad, you tell them they did great, and just build their confidence. Because at the end of the day, it's not about, you do want to win and you want to have your best day, but at the end of the day, you're going to win when you see how far your kids have come from that first day of practice to the fact that they can get into a room and talk to judges and present for 30 minutes. I could not have done that as kids at these ages. I just would not have been. I would have been nervous and scared to death. Hopefully, if I'd gone through a first Lego League team, I would not. I would have gotten over that. But I couldn't have done that as a teenager. I never got that experience and couldn't have done that. So, the things that they're doing is probably more than most of us ever had an experience with. So just be encouraging and supportive on the day of for coaching. And in the morning, try not to get too stressed out trying to figure out what your schedule and where you're going and what's happening. That's always a stressful time. That would be my biggest keys is practice and rehearse. And on the day of, don't get to coaching on the day of. Just be a big cheerleader on the day of. I think we covered a lot of the other like details and things in there. So that would be kind of the two things I think I would just add in today for judging.
And I will kind of echo a little bit what Jamie said, because it is great to win. I don't know many people who don't like winning. But one of the things that we like to say in first is that it's like a sport. It's a sport that is, not really athletic, but we describe it. It is the only sport where every participant can go pro. And even if your team loses the competition, that doesn't mean much at the end of the day. They can still graduate and go on and become engineers, computer scientists, all these other careers just open the doors for them. Even if they don't win the competition, they're building up these skills. Yeah.
I think I might add one other thing is that I thought of is also on competition day, it's a celebration. So let them celebrate and enjoy it. Encourage them to get out and talk to other kids and play games. A lot of teams will bring in games and different things. Encourage them to get out there and talk. Most of the time, which I don't know if it may be different this year, but most of your time in judging was in the morning. So once you get all that done in your robot game there, you keep track of the schedule and keep track of the kids, but don't necessarily think that you got to keep them sequestered away from everybody and you got to get them locked down so that they're focused. Let them have some fun and have a chance to celebrate. They'll remember that more than they will sitting at the table focused for the next match.
So judges, without kind of revealing any, identifying information, do you have any instances where like you just had, oh my gosh, this team did this thing that was so great, I wish every team did this? Or do you have any stories of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that team just did that, that you would like to share with us that kind of stand out in your mind so that we can maybe, give our coaches who might be watching this something to strive toward, or some things to kind of be watching out for that they might want to definitely try to avoid? And Jamie, if you have anything from a coaching perspective, we'd like to hear that too.
It was my first year that I was doing core values judging, and like normally I do project. That's like the thing that I'm good at and I feel more comfortable at. And core values is just a hard thing to judge to begin with. But I was with like a pretty senior judge who's done core values, so I felt comfortable. But like the second team that came in got into a fight. Like they started like hitting each other in core values. And it was like the coach was trying to pull them apart. It was a mess. That's like one of the more, I'm like amazed Scarlett still does core values. But I did have and then on a positive note, I had a team that I'm trying to figure out how to say this without giving away anything, but it was probably about 3 years ago, and they were talking about how I can't remember what the project even was about, but they were talking about how they would get into fights a lot. And here I am sitting there thinking, oh, please don't tell me that. Like, please don't tell me this. They're like, yeah, we would get into fights all the time. We would try and have a discussion about what we were going to do, and we never could figure it out. And then they told me this like really beautiful, wonderful story about how they all like sat in a little circle one day and they were like, why are we feeling this way? Why can we not have a communication? Whatever, why can't we communicate well? And they like sat there for, they told me 4 or 5 hours. I'm sure that's an exaggeration, probably it was 30 minutes, but, and they talked about how they could improve their communication skills and how that ended up helping their project. And that's the reason that they wound up with the thing that they got. And I thought, oh, well, that's just so lovely that they felt comfortable to say, like, we hated each other, but then we figured it out. So
And-
that kind of just,
And I'll kind of leverage in a story here is looking at the rubric, that is evidence, like that one incident of we sat down and tried to see what was going on, that can be used as evidence for, I count 5 of the 6 things on the core values rubric. So that one thing could improve kind of how the judges see you while improving how your team is functioning and how your kids are learning.
and then like as far as their project, it ended up really helping how their project was developed, because they were like, we developed this entire thing of how to go from plan A to plan B to somewhere in the middle that made us all happy. And that was just really wonderful that they were able to not only hit those core values points, but also as far as like project wise, be like, this is how we were able to make our design process more streamlined for our communication skills.
And so that's another good piece of evidence for the core values aren't something we just want you to do. They're things that make you a better team and make your students better people. And so that not only are they improving as people, but also they're improving as a team when they're trying to accomplish their project or their robot. So it's kind of, just +1s across the board. Other judging or coaching judging stories anybody wants to share?
I think I would add on with that, and not to brag, but I have to brag that we won a chairman's award for our FRC team, and so one of the big things that we pulled out of a lot of the judging and volunteering to judge and stuff from FRC that I think still applies, and what Anna just illustrated is to tell a story. It makes a lot more impact than if you just tell facts. So if you can tell a story, if something happens that illustrates one of the things on the rubric, make sure that gets into a presentation somewhere, because stories, everybody likes to hear a story. And that was a big thing. That's where our whole chairman's presentation was based off stories. And the judges in our feedback commented and said, we loved hearing your stories.
Scarlett or Andrew, do either of you have any judging stories you'd like to share with us while we're on the topic of stories?
I'm just always impressed with a team that is, I don't know if this is the right word, but well rehearsed. I think that there can be over rehearsed as well, but a well rehearsed presentation and a team that knows their stuff, they stand out beyond or above, the people that don't do that. So I think, being well rehearsed, which means, they're probably presenting their stuff not for the first time when they're in the room with the judges, and, very knowledgeable about, their project, their robot, what core values are, and just being very well behaved. I think judges are always impressed with that. And, having a fun skit and like cool outfits or whatever, that's just the icing on the cake.
I think I would add on to what Andrew said, and the way I would probably phrase it is we like to see teams polished, but not ironically robotic. If that kind of makes sense here.
Yeah, it's always good when you can tell that a team has like practiced their presentation, but you can always tell when they're just like reciting something they memorized versus like something that they actually implement. I don't really have a super interesting judging story besides the one that we already kind of told with a specific team that a kid was like, what did he say? He was like, I forgot what he said. You already said it earlier, but that was pretty funny.
Oh, Scarlett,
What did he say, Jamie?
You're not listening to me. So this is the inside joke to tell everybody. So I had a team at one point, and not too far back, but they came out of there, and the kids, we asked them, how did it go? I was like, oh, it was terrible. And it's like, why? What happened? I said, well, such and such. We were talking, doing something in the core. It was core values related. So Scarlett, who was judge, and they said something, and then he said, you're not listening to me. And so we were like, well, we didn't win that one. Because that was kind of, that's not exactly good core values when someone has to yell that you're listening to me.
Yeah. And I have like I have seen like teams that it almost seemed like they didn't go over the core values enough. Because there's teams that come in sometimes that are like kind of all over the place and like just literally running around the room. But it's always good when they like know what they're talking about and you can tell that they practiced.
And I will add that I don't think we touched on this tonight, but I like to remind people of this. We are not judging your kids on how well they know what the core values are. We are judging them based on how well they demonstrate the core values. I don't care if your kids can rattle off all the core values at first. It'd be cool to see, but it's not a big deal for me at the end of the day. I care, are they living the core values? Are they demonstrating them to the judges? Now, talking about getting more experience with judging, I've known Jamie for a while now, and at the first qualifier at his second year as a coach, I believe, you volunteered as a judge. Did you not, Jamie?
Yes, my second year I had volunteered as a judge. And then I think I've judged and participated in some way or some shape, form, or fashion every year since. So I've always volunteered, and that as an experience for a coach is unparalleled, because you kind of get to see what the judges are seeing, and that gives you an idea of what to expect from the other end and what to help your kids get ready for. And then I think that's true through all the programs. I volunteered and I would volunteer if you have any hopes in going on to the next step of First Tech Challenge or First Robotics, volunteer and judge and participate and get to know, you get to know the people and you get to know the competition, and you kind of get an idea of how things work. And that helps you prepare your students for that. And that's in every case. I've done that for every competition that we've ever done. And it's always been a big benefit is to get, I don't know that it's necessarily behind the scenes. It's just that you get to be in the shoes of the person that's judging. And it gives you a perspective that you don't get to see just by standing off to the side. It's a whole lot different to be marking that rubric for competition against other teams than when it is just watching your team go through it. You learn so much more.
Yeah, I will say that. So every year, right, we have our qualifiers usually, and then we have state. And every year I tell my coaches, look, if your team did not advance to the state competition, volunteer as a judge for us. And you can come to that and you can get ready for next year and you can see, okay, these teams are quote unquote better than my team against the rubrics. Why? How? What are they doing that I'm not doing? So you not only get the perspective of this is what the judges are looking for, but you also get the perspective of, oh, this is what other really good teams do. And so it's a great way to pick up best practices.
And I would say if you're watching this video, you're already on the newest trick, as we have a whole lot more resources and a lot more offerings to help you. And first, in your mentor, that's kind of my job. I would say that I've helped other teams beat me. Taylor has a famous quote that I can't give out because it has language in it, but I did help a team that beat my teams at the state for the championship. And I think, I don't want to say be too much, but I think every team that I helped in the last, right before COVID, every team that I had worked with that I visited or had a conversation with about different things passed on the state and won something at state. So happy to help and take advantage of that. And I'll be more than happy to help, because I've always said and will say, we're better off as a state and as a country if all our students are achieving and excelling. And if our students keep raise the bar high, then another group of students needs to raise that bar higher, and we'll constantly keep getting better. And all of us as adults will eventually have a nice world we can retire in when the youth can take care of everything.
Well said, Jamie. And that brings us up on our hour. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us tonight. It's been a great help to kind of get this information to our coaches. Before I stop the recording, does anybody else have anything else they want to kind of add to the end of the discussion here? All right, well, that is the wrap up of our webinar series for right now. I'm going to stop the recording, and then this will be available on YouTube just as soon as it can be.